Hi. People are often asking how to get a likeness, how to actually sketch a face. The only sketching that I do is the preliminary sketching before I do a painting. So I'm not really so much of a pencil worker. That's a complete art in its own. But obviously, when I'm painting, I want to try and get a likeness in most cases. And I just want to give a few tips on how to approach that. Now, when you're copying an image to the same size, that's about the easiest way to do it, because your eyes can scan from the image directly over to the paper, and you can see pretty easily if you're going awry. Normally, you're actually going to enlarge the picture, but in this case, I'll just show you the basic methodology. Okay, you want to give yourself a head start, like work on an easel. If you work on a flat surface, on a table or something of that nature, then you're introducing distortions to what you see straight away. So that's a big no-no. Work on an easel, or in some fashion where you can look directly down onto the image and onto the board or the piece of paper you're working on. So when you are working on an easel, put your image in a position where it's at the same height as your piece of paper or your canvas or a board. And I've actually angled this image, so I'm looking straight at the image, so there's no distortion going on. It's at my eye level. I'm looking straight on, there's no distortion. My eyes then turn and I'm looking straight at the piece of paper. So what we're trying to do is eliminate all types of, all ways that you can get distortion. So there's a lot of different ways to actually transfer the image to your piece of paper. So I'm just talking about doing it freehand. So what you need to do is to look at the image as a series of shapes. The problem with the portrait is we're designed after 1 million years of evolution to be looking at faces, to look at emotion on faces, to see if somebody, is showing love or anger or fear. So you immediately look at the eyes and you begin to think, oh, these eyes are sad, or they're interested in me, or whatever. You've got to eliminate that emotional context and just look at it as a series of shapes. So when I talk about shapes, this bit here is a shape. Now that's called the negative shape. It's the shape outside of the subject. But the brain can actually process random shapes a lot easier than it can when it has all this emotional context with the face. You should find it easier to actually draw that shape. And when you've drawn that shape, you've actually defined half of the face. So instead of looking at the face, look at the negative shape, and that will help you. So besides the negative shape, all these other shapes and just think of them as shapes. There's this shape here, there's this shape here, there's this shape here. So if you can get that shape correct, that's going to be good. There's this shape here. Look at them as shapes and look at the relationship to the shapes. For example, there's about an eye width between the eyes. People often put the eyes too wide or too close together. Just remember, in human beings, there's typically an eye width between the eyes. Typically, the corner of the eye lines up with the edge, the outer edge of the nose. On this side, because her head is tilted slightly, that's not the case. But where you can see it straight on, it lines up. The corner of the eye, the corner of the mouth, goes somewhere on the pupil, when the pupil, the iris is centered in the eye. And some people have got bigger mouths or smaller mouths, so there's some slight variation there, but those are the general rules. We can't see all of this lady's head, but the eyes, the bottom of the eyes, are typically halfway down the head. Because the human brain finds this area of the head very boring and this area of the head very interesting, people tend to have a very short forehead. So just be aware of that. The eyes are about halfway down the face. The end of the nose is a quarter, typically, a quarter of the way down the head. And in that remaining quarter, the mouth is somewhere in there at about an eighth. Obviously there's variations, that's why we all look different. There are variations. But if you stick to those general principles, then you're going to go a long way to getting something that at least looks like a human being. So what you should do when you're looking at your image is to get some kind of reference point, because you want to know where things are in relationship to this piece of paper that you're going to move them to. So I'm not going to do any measurements at all. I'm going to say I'm guessing that the center of this picture is somewhere there. This whole picture is going to be somewhere there. The center horizontally is going to be right about there. So that to me is the center of the picture. So using this piece of paper. The other thing that's important also is to, on your piece of paper, have the ratio of the width to the height the same as the image. Possibly that's the reason why some people, when they're doing measuring, they get things wrong, because they're not comparing apples with apples. So the ratio of the width to the height needs to be the same as the on the image. So let's assume, for this purpose of this, that this area here is the equivalent area as the picture. So I think it's a bit too wide actually. So we said that the center of the picture is about there. So the corner of that nose, that point there, is about here. The eyes are From there to there, the eyebrows are roughly half of that distance. So the eyebrows are roughly there. And the bottom of the nose is, and you have to start guessing, is approximately there. The mouth is approximately there, somewhere in there. So let's look at this this negative shape. So we think that the eyes are somewhere here. The eyes are going to be somewhere here. Look at this negative shape. It starts up over here and it comes down here and it comes down like this and it goes around like this. So assuming the dimensions are right, look at this shape that I've defined here. How similar is that to this shape here? How similar is this in shape and dimensions to this over here? That's the question you ask yourself. So where the shape starts, just above there, are the eyebrows. And we know that the eyes, we know that this eye is in line with the corner of the nose. So we know that that eye is in there somewhere. Always also pay attention when you're doing a portrait to how vertical the face is. Now she's tilting her head slightly, so there's a slight tilt. So the head is kind of tilting like this, and therefore the eyes are also tilting. So the other eye is along a line like this, perpendicular to that vertical line. Now we said there's about an eye distance between. So the other eye is there. The eyebrow we decided was there, and it wraps around, the shading wraps around and it comes down. The nose broadens out here. And then we have a small gap, and then we have the mouth. Something like this here. Remembering, of course, that there's a line across there, there's a line there, there's a line there. These lines are all parallel. So, because my piece of paper wasn't exactly proportioned, I'm getting some kind of errors. So you look at your picture and you check to see if errors are creeping in. Of course, as you're drawing, you're going to find that you've made some mistakes and you can adjust the lines. So I discovered because the ratio of this piece of paper wasn't spot on, that I was making the face too wide. So I made some adjustments to lines and did a bit more shading, and then I got just a touch of acrylic just to bring out those highlights. There's some very attractive highlights on this image. So this would be a preliminary sketch before doing a proper oil painting of the image. And doing these preliminary drawings is really beneficial, because then you notice things, because you're analysing the face so much, you're getting a very good idea about, you know, how mistakes occur, where you've made mistakes. So once you're happy that you're fairly close to the image, then it's going to be a lot easier when you actually do your final painting. So looking now through the camera, I can see some things that need to be fixed up. I think possibly the nose is a bit broad. But once you've identified problems, then you know what you need to fix up. It's the problems that you don't see that become a pain, because you can't then fix them up. So definitely mine is wider, but I put that down to the fact that the ratio that I was working on wasn't exactly as per the A4 sheet of paper. So I can see that her eyebrows need to be down a bit lower to give that expression on her face of the lowered eyebrows. She looks very sad. The lips are slightly the wrong shape. The shading isn't perfect, especially around this part. But using those little dabs of acrylic to bring out those highlights, I've got a pretty good idea of how I would want to proceed in the final painting.